What's up, Taiwan? I'm Eric Gao, and thanks for joining us for the news this evening. Taiwan's main opposition leader will reportedly meet with officials from Washington's representative office in Taiwan. As Alan Liu reports, this meeting could address growing political debates about Taiwan's defense spending.
I'm here at the American Institute in Taiwan, the U.S.'s de facto embassy here. Officials from this building are set to meet with the new head of Taiwan's main opposition, Kuomintang, Yoon. That's according to two sources who spoke to TaiwanPlus on condition of anonymity. This comes amid fierce debates between the KMT and the ruling Democratic Progressive Party over how much to spend on Taiwan's defense. Taiwan is reviewing a special defense budget that one DPP lawmaker says could reach as high as $40 billion. Zheng openly opposes increasing defense spending and has been critical of U.S. calls for Taiwan to raise it to up to 10% of GDP.
美国现在的期待是远远超过我们可以合理负担的范围。台湾虽然是一个经济实力很强的地方，但我们也没有办法负担起这么高的军费预算。
Responding to questions about the meeting, an AIT spokesperson told TaiwanPlus that the agency hosts regular discussions with leaders from across the political spectrum in Taiwan. It said this is part of continuing efforts to strengthen the U.S.-Taiwan partnership. We also reached out to the KMT but did not receive a response. One expert says it's normal for U.S. officials to show concern over Taiwan's defense capabilities, especially as a key political figure pushes back against increased defense spending. But he says Washington's overall position on Taiwan remains unchanged.
The direction of the U.S. policies are remaining the same. That is to strengthen the ties with the allies and also to strengthen the Indo-Pacific strategy.
This won't be the first time that the AIT has met with KMT officials recently. In August, the Institute met with party lawmakers to discuss U.S.-Taiwan defense cooperation. The KMT posted afterwards on social media that it supports raising defense spending to 3.5% of GDP. Some say the meeting between the AIT and Zheng shows Washington's interest in understanding the new KMT leader's approach to Taiwan's defense. That's as the country looks ahead to next year's military budget. Patrick Chen and Alan Liu in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Japan has condemned a Chinese diplomat's violent remarks about Prime Minister Takaichi Sanai's support for Taiwan. That's according to local media reports. In a since-deleted post on X, Xue Jian, the head of China's consulate in Osaka, called Takaichi a disgusting head that he would not hesitate to chop off. Xue made the comments after the Prime Minister told Japan's legislature that an attack on Taiwan would be grounds for Japan's self-defense force to mobilize. Japan is one of several Asian countries concerned about China's coercive activities around Taiwan. Xue later posted that Japan's discussion of a Taiwan emergency amounts to meddling in China's internal affairs. Some Japanese lawmakers are now calling for his removal. High-level current and former officials from Taiwan have made back-to-back visits to Europe in recent months. It comes as Taipei seeks closer ties with the region to push back against Beijing's efforts to isolate it. Cadence Quaranta reports.
Former Taiwan President Tsai arrives in Germany just a day after Taiwan's Vice President Bi Kim-hsiao returned from her breakthrough trip to Brussels.
同盟怎么看跟肖美琴接力访欧，台欧关系是不是越来越好，越来越紧密？
我们大家继续努力吧。
Tsai will give a speech at the Berlin Freedom Conference on Monday, which she said she hoped would help strengthen Taiwan's partnership with the country. Taiwan has been working hard in the region. These back-to-back visits are part of the country's broader efforts to deepen ties with Europe. Last Friday, Taiwan's vice president gave an unprecedented speech inside the European Parliament at the summit of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, or IPAC, a forum of lawmakers concerned about China's global threats, calling for continued support for Taiwan and for democracies everywhere.
We don't just want to survive. We want democracies to thrive. We're not just defending what we have, but building what we want the future to look like.
This was a huge deal for Taiwan. Most European countries do not have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, instead choosing to recognize China. They frequently face backlash for any interaction with the Taiwanese government, as China claims Taiwan as its territory. So allowing a sitting Taiwanese vice president to visit, let alone give a public speech in parliament, is rare to say the least. Taiwan's foreign minister, Lin Jialong, who also made 2 visits to Europe in September, to Italy, the Czech Republic, Austria, and Poland, said it showed Taiwan-Europe ties are entering a new phase. Taiwan's focus on the region comes as China increasingly tries to isolate it diplomatically, poaching its allies, with several cutting ties with Taiwan in recent years, and only 12 remaining. In a speech at the Warsaw Security Forum in Poland, Foreign Minister Lin called on Europe to stand with Taiwan against authoritarianism.
And today, authoritarian regimes, many China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, have formed an axis of upheaval to challenge the rule-based international order. And China is largely seen as the decisive enabler behind Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As a result, democracies around the world must act in concert to counter the existential and the systemic threat.
As Taiwan seeks to deepen its engagement with Europe, each visit, from the vice president to the former president, shows a growing resolve to forge partnerships despite pressure from Beijing. Klein Wong and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
As Taiwan appears to be stepping up efforts to strengthen ties with Europe, Cadence talks to Marcin Jezewski of the European Value Center to learn why.
Several high-level Taiwanese officials, including its vice president and foreign minister, have made trips to Europe over the last several months. What's Taiwan's goal here?
Europe definitely constitutes an important part of the strategy of diversification in Taiwan's quasi-diplomatic, economic, social, and cultural relations. Already in 2016, when we witnessed the transfer of power from the KMT's Ma Ying-jeou to the DPP's Tsai Ing-wen, the passing of such foreign policy strategies as the New Southbound policy have made it clear that for Taiwan, one of the best tools of risk mitigation in the increasingly volatile geopolitical system, it was indeed diversification. And therefore, while in recent years we have seen a considerable expansion of exchanges in various fields with Taiwan's more traditional quasi-diplomatic partners, such as the United States and Japan, we are also seeing an effort, a whole-of-government effort to connect to new potential partners, indeed in South and Southeast Asia under the New Southbound policy, but also to Europe.
And is this desire for increased cooperation mutual?
Yes, indeed. I believe that an important foundation of these exchanges is their mutual nature. So Europe recognizes that it can benefit from engaging more with Taiwan when it comes to building up its capacity to build industry in strategic technologies. So Taiwan is a natural partner for individual member states and the bloc at large, for example, in terms of building up a European supply chain for semiconductors, but also for security cooperation, given that intelligence services of European countries across the bloc are increasingly seeing China as a source of instability. The European Union has the infamous element definition of its partnership with China. It's a complicated one. China is viewed as a partner, but also a competitor and systemic rival. And in recent years, we have definitely seen that even though China is not explicitly named as a threat, unlike Russia, the balance of these three elements has definitely shifted towards China being seen as a systemic rival.
That was Marcin Jezewski with the European Value Center. Economy Minister Kuomintang says U.S. trade talks are continuing, even as the U.S.'s top court weighs limits on the president's tariff powers.
对台湾来讲的话，我们还是要持续跟美国去谈的主要的理由是你也可以看到，它有一些本来是对等关税的项目里面，它要搬到232去。
Section 232 of the U.S. Trade Expansion Act affects most of Taiwan's top exports, especially chips. Gong said that Section 232 negotiations are the government's current focus. The U.S. Supreme Court recently heard oral arguments on whether Trump exceeded his powers by imposing the so-called reciprocal tariffs on many countries, including a 20% rate on Taiwan. But even if the court cancels those blanket rates, it would not affect any levies imposed through Section 232. The United Nations Annual Climate Conference, COP30, begins on Monday in Brazil. This year's meeting comes as the UN reports that the world is heading toward a global temperature rise of 2.8 degrees Celsius under current policies. The U.S., which has withdrawn from the Paris Climate Agreement under President Trump, is not sending an official delegation to COP30. Taiwan cannot officially attend the conference because it is not a UN member state, but it is still planning to send a delegation. Though not a signatory to the Paris Agreement, Taiwan has made significant efforts to decarbonize, achieving a 6.7% reduction in emissions last year. Former South Korean President Yoon Yeol now faces more charges related to a short-lived declaration of martial law last December. Special prosecutors in Seoul have indicted Yoon for abusing power and aiding an enemy state. They say they found evidence on a military official's cell phone that Yoon deliberately tried to provoke a military conflict with North Korea to justify martial law. They say he plotted with other defendants, including the former defense minister and the former military intelligence chief. Global chip giant TSMC has seen its monthly revenue reach nearly $12 billion, a new record. The Taiwanese company reported its October numbers on Monday, which showed 17% year-on-year growth. TSMC's total revenue for the first 10 months of this year has surpassed $100 billion, driven by strong global demand for AI chips. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang also visited TSMC over the weekend to request more chips. It comes as TSMC reportedly plans to build up to 12 new advanced fabs and packaging plants in Taiwan over the next year. Taiwan has issued a sea warning for Typhoon Fung, which is on its way toward the country after battering the Philippines over the weekend. As Irene Lin reports, parts of eastern Taiwan have already begun preparing for the storm.
The once famous island retreat in northeastern Philippines was submerged by huge waves in a split second. Typhoon Fung, the second typhoon to hit the country in 2 weeks, made landfall on Sunday, killing at least 2 people and displacing close to 1 million residents.
I was not able to sleep last night. I told my grandchildren to pray for our safety. I was just sitting the whole night waiting for the storm to pass.
The typhoon has moved on from the Philippines and is now heading toward Taiwan's southwest. While still a few thousand kilometers from Taiwan, the storm's outer edge has already hit the country's east. In Hualien, where past storms led to a barrier lake breach and flash floods that inundated homes and fields, authorities have sounded the highest level alarm and called for evacuation in 3 townships along the river on Sunday. The forestry agency, which monitors the barrier lake, predicts the region will have up to 800 millimeters of rain per hour, far exceeding the 200 millimeters required for the red alert. And with water levels nearing that of September's disaster, officials aren't ruling out the risk of another flood.
极端的情况之下，预测淹塞湖会发生的状况，雨量的水会下来之外，可能在上游会形成新的淹塞湖。我们预估的最大水量大概是1500万吨。
After over a month and a half since the flood disaster, most of the town has been cleaned up, but local residents fear that the looming storm will cause new destruction.
你看，我们有的家里都整理好了啊。
Meanwhile, in the southeastern county of Taitung, rice and banana farmers are rushing to harvest their unripe crops before the storm causes irreversible damage. Typhoon season in Taiwan usually ends in October. If Typhoon Fung makes landfall, it will be the country's first November typhoon in nearly 6 decades. With extreme weather events becoming more frequent and disastrous, it's a never-ending cycle of cleanup and recovery for the Pacific Island countries. Tsai and Irene Lin for TaiwanPlus.
And thanks again for joining us here on What's Up Taiwan. If you want to get more updates from us in your feed, follow us on social media. Finally, we take you to Berlin, where Christmas meets techno. Visitors skate through an ice rink glowing with lights, disco balls, and 600 upside-down Christmas trees. I'm Eric Ao. Take care. We'll see you next time.